Diego Lopes put on an absolute masterclass last night at UFC 306 to the point where I've seen a lot of people last night in my live chat and in the comments talking about Diego Lopes and how he should be fighting for the title next. Does he deserve it? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. My name is James Lynch. So let's talk first about that fight itself. It was a dominant win. Lopes was very close to finishing Brian Ortega in that first round last night. And, outside of maybe that Yair Rodriguez win, which I think was more of an injury, we haven't really seen Ortega look like that. So that's why everyone's talking about this win. And the UFC likes Diego Lopes. It's pretty obvious. He's got that it factor. He's, an entertaining fighter. The fans seem to like I don't know anyone who doesn't like Diego Lopes. I mean, this guy's entertaining, good personality. And dare I say, he's one of those it factor guys for the UFC where they keep using him. And I think it's pretty obvious. You look at the cards he's been on this year, competing at UFC 300 against Sodiq Yusuff. Then they bring him back to fight, ended up being Danny Ige, but it was supposed to be Brian Ortega. And then they put him on this card. I mean, these are three of the biggest cards that we've had this year. So obviously the UFC really likes Diego Lopes, and I could definitely see them pushing him for a title shot. Of course, the option right now would be Alexander Volkanovski fighting the winner of the Ilia Topuria Max Holloway at UFC 308. So let's talk first about some of the reasons why Lopes would sort of deserve that. Again, I mentioned it there. The UFC really likes him. The fans like him. Ortega was ranked number 3 prior to the fight last night, so he's in the number 3 spot. The only guys ahead of Diego Lopes in the rankings right now are Max Holloway, who's fighting Topuria, and Alexander Volkanovski, who's been the long-reigning champ before he got finished by Ilia Topuria. Now, if you've also been watching this channel, you know how very vocal I've been about Alexander Volkanovski and how he should be getting the next title shot. And the reason is simply that, two things. Number one, I think Volk was a very good, let's go look at Volk right now so we have something to look at on the screen instead of Diego Lopes, because this is how this all ties into what I'm about to say about Diego Lopes and what I think should be next for him. So you look at Volkanovski's resume, 26-4. He did the UFC a big favor last year by fighting Islam on short notice. Okay, so he does the company a favor, and then they didn't really help him out after that. They're like, hey, we need you to fight Topuria in February. October 21st, end of October to fighting end of February. That's not a ton of time off, and I think that did contribute to the loss. I'm not saying Topuria would have lost the fight if Volk had a longer camp, but it certainly didn't help that he had been knocked out by Islam, and then he was knocked out against by Topuria when they fought as well. So I think personally, Volk has been a good company man. You look at the years of title defenses. I mean, this is a guy that had never lost a fight in the UFC prior to the first Islam fight, which was very close. And then he loses the rematch, and then he loses the fight to Topuria as well. That should be rewarded. There's a lot of newer fans. I don't know why. I guess because they're just very reactionary. They don't seem to care if a fighter has defended his title for years, which in the case of Volk, he has. And Volk's had a pretty strong schedule throughout those title defenses. A couple of fights with Max Holloway, Brian Ortega, the Korean Zombie. Yeah, we can skip that one. And then he fought Max Holloway again. Again, Max Holloway is about as tough as it gets and was as tough as it gets in the division prior to fighting him. So that should be rewarded. Volk should be next. So where does Diego Lopes fit into all this? That's the big question. I think the plan going forward for Diego Lopes is that he should consider, or the UFC should consider, and I wonder if they are considering it, is making him the backup for UFC 308. My guy Joseph in the chat, Joseph, you're watching this right now, he was the one that actually suggested this, and I think it's a brilliant idea. Now look, I realize Lopes just fought. It was September 14th last night. This card is taking place at the end of October, so not a ton of notice there. But who's going to be the backup for this fight? This is a huge fight, right? This is one of the biggest fights this year. This is the type of fight that should have a backup fighter for it. It's not going to be Volkanovski. Volkanovski, I don't know if he said it in interviews, but I don't think Volkanovski is going to want to be a backup for this title fight. I think he would rather wait, get a proper camp, and then fight whoever ends up winning this fight. So this is where Lopes comes in. I think he deserves it. Like I said, he just dominated Brian Ortega. He beat Sodiq Yusuff, finished him, who was a ranked opponent. There's a lot of, fought Dan Ige on 3 hours notice, still got the win there. I think that satisfies the Diego Lopes for a title shot crowd if he gets the backup spot here. Now, let's say he does get the backup spot, or let's say he doesn't, and, this fight ends up going through, or, he doesn't end up getting this opportunity. Then what do you do with him? I think there's a couple options there as well if we look at the rankings right now. And again, I think this still satisfies everyone, because here's the only critique I'll say with Diego Lopes last night. And you guys tell me if you agree or not in the comments. The Ige fight, again, it was 3 hours. Don't take a ton of stock into that. Did slow down a bit in that one. He slowed down a bit last night, too, against Ortega. I think we need to see Diego Lopes in a 5-round fight before we talk about him fighting for a title. Again, I think because of him beating Ortega the way he did, I think that's worth, considering for a title. But I think there are some questions about him fighting 5 rounds. So I think we need to see that first So that's where, let's say if Topuria is, I mean, let's go with the backup scenario first. Let's say it's Holloway who's out. You got Topuria and Diego Lopes. Again, there's no one else that makes sense to back up this title fight, really. So I think that this is where you got to go with Lopes as being the backup. Lopes, Topuria, great fight. Two huge fan bases, two entertaining fighters. I think that makes sense. Now, let's say Topuria is out and it's Holloway who is on this card and needs to fight someone. Lopes makes sense there too. Imagine a fight between Diego Lopes and Max Holloway. Now I know what you're thinking. What does Holloway get out of this? He's supposed to be fighting for the title. I think there could be consideration for an interim title. I know that's crazy, but if you add it up, let's say Topuria is injured in this fight for some reason. Knock on wood, he doesn't. I want to see this fight, by the way. Just throwing that out there. I'm not trying to throw any bad karma out there. But let's say Topuria can't make the fight for some reason and he's injured and Lopes has to step in. When would be the earliest that Topuria could fight again? It's probably not till next year. When did he fight last? It was February. It's been a bit of a layoff. My rule is you can do an interim title if you haven't been fighting for a year. That's likely when Topuria would return if he is out of the fight, just due to scheduling. Like where else would they put him, right? So again, I think you could do an interim title and entice Holloway that way and Lopes as well. And then Lopes gets that 5-round test. He fights Holloway and there's a belt on the line too. I'm just saying, I know this is really far out there, but this is how far I've looked into this as far as some options here for Diego Lopes. Okay, so again, that's scenario one. Lopes is the backup. One of these guys is injured. Now, scenario two is obviously if the fight goes through and, Lopes needs to fight someone else. I have two names that make sense. First name is the winner of the Mossari Voyev and Aljamain Sterling fight. Now, if it's Sterling who wins, I think that's a slam dunk. That's a fresh matchup. Sterling, Lopes, good fight. No issues there. I think that fight makes a lot of sense. Sterling's not going to be fighting for the title next, even if he goes out there and finishes Mossari Voyev, because again, I think he's low on the pecking order for title shots. And this way he could fight a really good fighter in Lopes. And then for sure, you'd know that the winner of that would get the title shot. If Voyev wins, I don't really want to see that rematch right away. Just because, I don't know, we saw it last year. It was last May. I know it was, more than a year ago. But I just, that's not a fight I'm really like clamoring to see. I think instead you do Arnold Allen there. Again, fresh matchup. Arnold's ranked number 5. Arnold's coming off a win in his last fight. Not as good of a win as some of the other ones in the division, but Arnold Allen, Diego Lopes, that sounds good to me. Make it a 5-round fight. Whatever Diego Lopes' next fight is, regardless of what I've just mentioned here, it's got to be a 5-round fight to see if he can go those full 5 rounds. He might not need to, but I do have some questions about the cardio, and I don't think, like I said, if he's in the championship rounds with some of these higher level guys, I don't know how Lopes does. I don't know if he wins there. So that is my solution here to Diego Lopes. Again, I do understand the people who feel like he deserves a title shot, but I also got to let people know Volk has done years of service for the UFC. He's been a good company guy. He's got to get the next title shot. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at this as far as figuring out the next move here for Diego Lopes. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. What do you think should be next for Diego Lopes? Do you think he should be the backup? Do you like the matchups I just mentioned with, Sterling if he beats Voyev or Arnold Allen? I think those all make sense. The biggest thing though is he's got to fight 5 rounds. I think that certainly makes sense a lot. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram at Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. If you have any other video ideas you want for this channel, let me know in the comments. I'm always open ears with that stuff. And I'll have another video out here shortly. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon.